I moved to London from Germany 2.5 years ago, and coming here, I initially thought the culture is not going to be as different as it is in Germany, but I was quite surprised by the slight cultural changes that confronted me when I came to London. And as you liked part 1 of this video so much, I decided to do a part 2. So welcome to part 2 of cultural shocks when moving to the UK, specifically to London. So this list is not going to be divided into positive or negative things. It's just observations, like things that caught my eye and where I thought, oh, that's interesting. We don't have this in Germany, or that interesting. I wouldn't have expected it to be like this, okay? So one thing is actually quite interesting because Germany obviously was demolished after World War II. So a lot of the buildings in Germany have been built after World War II. They're like from the 1960s, 1970s, that whole rebuilding area after World War II. Whereas in London, you have lots of buildings that are from the Victorian area. You have lots of buildings that are super, super old. And the infrastructure obviously is old. Now, what this does is it looks very pretty from the outside and you're like, wow, this is such a historical city and it looks beautiful. But when you live in these buildings, it can be a pain in terms of like isolation. So a lot of buildings don't have proper isolation. For example, the flat that we live in right now, it's so cold in winter. Like even though we turn up the heat at its max, the building just does not keep the heat in, right? And in summer, obviously it just overheats super fast. So these things were interesting. This also applies to like other things. For example, we don't have a water meter in our flat. The water company came and they basically said because the building is old, it's not even possible to build a water meter in because the water supply with the neighbors is all connected and it's impossible to separate it and to determine how much water is being used per flat. So old infrastructure was something that I never thought of when moving here. But yeah, and obviously historically it just makes sense, like why demolish houses that still work, right? Yeah, but like again, coming from Germany, I never faced these issues back in Germany, so that was interesting when moving here. And on top of that, and that's like nothing with old structure, but also like when you walk through London, and that's in my opinion positive, but obviously that's a thing of taste, the buildings are not high-rise. So there is an area where you have lots of high-rise buildings, you know, the Gherkin and the Shard and these buildings, but overall if you compare it to other big cities such as Istanbul or Tokyo or Shanghai, then London is quite low-rise in terms of buildings. So a lot of like when you go to London's neighborhoods, a lot of buildings are 2-3 floors max. There aren't as many skyscrapers or big apartment buildings or block buildings out there, which I kind of find really nice. It limits the expansion of the city, which makes sense because if you think about it, a big city is hard to manage. You have to make sure that the canalization has a capacity, public transportation has a certain capacity. So just by building more and more houses and making them higher and higher and enable more and more people to live in London then causes new issues, right? So yeah, I was quite pleasantly surprised by how rural London is, how it's not as chaotic as other big cities are in the world. And also, on top of that, I find it also interesting to see that a lot of houses are brick houses. And I've traveled a little bit in the UK as well. So I did a little England road trip, a Wales road trip. And I can also say that these brick houses are really like very fundamental in the UK in general, I guess, from what I've seen. So these red brick houses, you can see them all over London and also in all kinds of neighborhoods. They're very popular and a lot of buildings just look the same. It's these red brick houses basically with no insulation, at least where we live. There is no insulation. All right, so this is around the topic of housing. Also, this is kind of attached to the topic of housing. I thought, so before moving to London, I lived for 6 months in the US, and before that I spent my entire life in Germany, okay? So this is like all the experience I have in terms of like living internationally. And in the US, what I've seen is, yes, life was more expensive, especially going there as an international student, which is what I did, and I had like a German stipend, and it really like it was expensive, like veggies, fruits, housing. I had to really budget well to make ends meet in the US. But then when we talked to people who lived and worked there, we also realized that, okay, people earn accordingly. So life is expensive, but the salaries, the wages are much higher than it is in Germany, like for the same position, for the same role. So having that experience, we thought, okay, London is going to be expensive, but then the wages are going to be high accordingly. So an engineer in London is going to earn more in the same position as an engineer in Germany, for example. Well, that did not turned out to be true, which came as a huge shock for us. So obviously I'm a PhD student, but my husband Fatih, he is an engineer, right? And he works in a tech company now. But when we first came, like we thought, okay, like wages are gonna be high because how else are you gonna make ends meet in London? And it turns out wages were even lower than in Germany. And then we also realized that wages in London, UK-wide, are still higher than outside of London because London is expensive. But even though they are higher in London, they're not even as high as wages in a small city in Germany. So that was a huge shock for us, where we were like, oh wow, we did not account for this at all when we moved here in terms of like budgeting. So yeah, which goes hand in hand with that most people here spend 50 to 60% of their wage in rent, which is insane. And yeah, so I think it goes without saying, like, a cost of living crisis in London and all these things are definitely there for a reason. So the salary and cost of living, they don't match at all. Okay, coming over to a little less serious topics. So I realized from also traveling to other countries that each country has like their own favorite flavor, I guess, in their desserts, or yeah, basically in their desserts. So for example, when you go to Japan, it's matcha, right? So you have matcha everywhere, matcha chocolate, matcha milkshake, matcha whatever, matcha cake. Matcha is like the thing there. And in the UK or in Germany, it's apple. We love apple cake and plums and these kind of things. And in the UK, it is oranges and mint, which is interesting, I guess. Just like because you have like orange chocolate and you know these Jaffa cakes and then mint after it. And I found this very interesting because mint chocolate is probably the last chocolate on earth in terms of flavor that I'd be craving in my life. Whereas when we were doing these research group meetings and we got snacks, one of the staples that we got all the time for the group was like mint chocolate and orange chocolate. So interesting. Like, yeah, so orange and mint is big in the UK in desserts, in chocolates and cakes and biscuits and stuff. Yeah, just an interesting observation, I guess. Another interesting observation is following. Crossing red lights is socially accepted in London, not only by pedestrians, but also like cyclists do this all the time, where they just cross at red light. Coming from Germany, this is like really, I had to change my habits because I realized when you're in central London, the locals, they will always cross at red light, because obviously, for example, when I go to central London, I go to work, it's always the same route, it's always the same light, and it's always the same street, and I just know how things work there, right? And tourists are always, they just wait for the light to turn green, I guess. So coming here, I found it really interesting to observe this, especially when you have like parents with small children and then they just pick their children up by their hands and they're like, okay, they're hushing them over the street, right? And you'll have elderly people, they feel super entitled. They'll just be like walking super slow and cozy with their walking sticks and through a red light, and then the car will come and they just have to, the cars wait for the old lady to cross through the red light, even though it's red and the lady could have just waited for it to turn green, right? So these things, I've observed them quite a lot and I found them interesting. And now, obviously, after living here for 2.5 years, I've adjusted my own behavior and now I also walk. I do the same. And when I visit my family in Germany, people, and I just look left, right, no car, okay, then I just walk. And I have a little brother and he was so shocked. He was like, it's red, you cannot cross, stop. And I was like, oh yes, wait, we have to wait. Because it's definitely not socially accepted in Germany to cross when the lights are red, especially from a point of setting a good example for children, because children cannot maybe look up properly if a car comes or not comes when they're by their own, so you don't want them to copy your behavior and then get run over by a car. So yeah, that was interesting, and it kind of affected my own behavior as well. So now I'm also just walking when it's red. What I also love is the whole policy around no cash, just card. It's funny how I'm so unfamiliar with British banknotes. On our road trip that we did recently, we went to a parking house that, for the first time ever, I saw this in the UK, where I could not pay with card and it had to be with change. And I had like this a little bit of change with me, and I had to like really look closely at it to to understand whether this is like £1 or £2 and what this change is about that I have in my hand, because I'm so not used to using cash in the UK because everything is by card, and that's so convenient. Like whether you just pay something for 50p or £1, it doesn't matter how small the amount is, it's just with card. So yeah, as a card person myself, I just love that. It's very inconvenient to carry cash and then you have change and where to go with all that change. So yeah, I love that. Also, on the topic of London, this also goes hand in hand with the low-rise buildings. You have so much green in London, and I did not expect that. So for example, even like in central London, you have like all these parks. You have Regent Park, Hyde Park, lots of park areas. But also if you go to the neighborhoods of London, for example, I live in Ealing, and Ealing is so green. Like there are just like in my immediate surrounding, I have so many different parks, maybe 10 parks if I were to count them, like bigger park areas, not just like small parks, really like big parks. So I love that it is so green. Like when I go to uni, I walk through Hyde Park. It's just love it, really. And I did not expect this from a big city like London to be so green. Like if you put it into the context of that London is like a big city, that you have so much green in such a big city, I think that did not came natural to me. I wouldn't expect that, which I appreciate a lot. I think it's beautiful. Also, another point on the topic of UK being so rainy and dark, I think I found this prejudice to be just partially true. I've never experienced heavy rain in London. So yeah, it will rain occasionally, especially in autumn, winter time, but it's never like, oh, it rained all day and all night for 10 days in a row. No, that's not the issue. I think there isn't that much rain in London, but it's dark. I think that prejudice is very true. Like especially like from autumn, maybe September, October until May, it's super dark. The sun sets on the shortest days. It's dark from 3:30 to 4 p.m., which is basically in the midst of your workday. So there are days where I don't even see the sun at all. So the darkness, really, that's a depressive part. The cloudiness. So that you have such a thick layer of clouds in winter, and the days go by, sometimes weeks, where there is not a single crack of sunlight. I think that's the part. It's not even the rain. I've never thought that it rains so much here, at least not in the 2.5 years that I spent here. Okay, two more things. One cultural thing and then a couple more around the school system. So culturally, so coming from Germany, I'm ethnically Turkish, okay? So, and Turkish people are one of the biggest ethnic minorities in Germany. So it's quite normal to have all these Turkish kebab houses and these döner culture, and like Turkish culture, you'll find that everywhere in Germany just because it's the biggest or one of the biggest ethnic minorities in Germany. So interestingly, that's the same with Daisy culture in the UK, right? Especially in London. So I didn't know that, obviously, because how I didn't do my research. And then when I came here, I realized, wow, like Daisy culture is so dominant here. Like I'm talking like Pakistani, Indian, Bengali cuisine and all that. So I found it quite interesting how my knowledge around India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all these countries just increased just by just living in London, like not actively working on increasing my knowledge, but just being surrounded by all these curry places and these restaurants. And now I have much more knowledge about like all the food that there is, different kinds of food that go beyond butter chicken. So yeah, that was also very unexpected. Like I didn't expect that when I moved to London, that my knowledge around Daisy culture will increase all of a sudden, right? That being said, a couple more things about the school system. So what I think is very cute are students in school uniforms. That we don't have school uniforms in Germany. So I always I think it looks cute. Like I don't have like an opinion on it whether it's good or bad. I don't care that much, I guess. But like it looks very pretty when they walk like on the street or in the buses, and especially not knowing this myself growing up, it always catches my eye, and I always like look at them and look at their uniform, and I'll be like, oh yeah, this is actually quite cute how they walk. That's one thing. The other thing is, and I'm so excited about this, is like graduation ceremonies, like wearing a cap and gown and all that for graduation. And some German universities have this, where you have a graduation ceremony, but usually it's never as big as it is in the UK or as in the US, right? So I am just like, when I look at the graduation ceremonies at Imperial College, I get so excited for my own graduation ceremony because I've never ever had a graduation ceremony before, and I have a bachelor and a master, and it just never happened. Like, I really want to wear that cap and gown thing. And yeah, so I'm very excited about that, and I cannot wait for this. I just love that. I love that getting a diploma is being celebrated because a lot of work, effort, sweat, grit goes into that diploma, and it's nice to have a day dedicated for celebration and yeah, to do it also like in a beautiful manner, like with these gowns and stuff, and not just, yeah, because for example, I got my master and my bachelor diploma via post and it just, yeah, came to me via post. My bachelor diploma even had a nick on the corner because of the postage. Yeah, so I can't wait. All right, this sums up another list of cultural differences that I just observed from coming from Germany and living in London. I hope you found this as interesting and enjoyable as the last video. If you did so, let me know. I can also do a part 3. And yeah, if you haven't done so already, check out my Instagram channel where I post daily tips on academia in bite-sized pieces. And apart from that, wherever you are, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!